Hey everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Thanks again for joining me here. I hope you're having a great day. We're going to talk about our macro structure here, just generally some key levels we want to very much pay attention to. True retail longs versus open interest delta, basically zeroing out, telling us shorts are too heavy. And obviously these lower timeframes here where this most recent Asia low here was effectively swept. Now again, weekend price action, different story. These trading sessions are not always the most accurate on a weekend, but it is still something we want to kind of look at and pay attention to, along with some 4-hour bullish divergences we want to go ahead and discuss as well. So that's all stuff we're going to talk about here today. We'll make it quick and easy, Bitcoin only, and let's take a closer look. All right, folks, before we jump into the backend data, thanks again for being an awesome part of my life. Like, subscribe, and follow if you haven't yet already, and join us over on Twitter, Telegram, or Discord. I've also got a trading academy, community, and signals group. Speaking of which, just to kind of touch on that here, I did sound a pretty solid update here recently, just regarding the specifics on what I'm planning to do here. Basically, looking to effectively, shift away from swing trades and kind of move more towards scalping/day trading. And the focus would be to potentially have some live trading sessions on chat or Discord or voice chat. So if you're part of our community, just know that that's going to be coming. It'll be kind of a work in progress in the immediate future, try to figure out a good schedule and all that stuff. But just know that's something we're looking at transitioning. And the main reason why is because the market is total trash lately as far as just like significant swings, like for lack of a better term, swing trading has been much more challenging than it should be, or than it ever has been in the past. And holding trades for, honestly, anything more than a 24-hour period lately has been quite catastrophic. Or just in general, you probably know if you're holding trades, they just go the wrong way and things happen really fast. Having said that, you can still swing trade effectively, don't get me wrong, but it's just one of those things you want to pay attention to. Anyways, enough about that. I just want to kind of clue you in there because I know a lot of folks were kind of curious what that meant. And if you're not part of my Discord, maybe you didn't know that. All right, anyways, all that being said, let's focus here on this guy in the hourly time frame, just kind of touching on the fact that we still have basically over-leveraged longs. That's mainly funding rates here. Basically, funding rates are positive still because spot volume is low. It's kind of like if you're not familiar with spot volume being a relevant factor for funding rates, there's an imbalance of futures versus spot. When that imbalance occurs, then you're paying more or less for a trade in a specific direction. So long story short, leveraged longs are over leveraged right now. We have too many, all right? So that basically just boils down to the simple fact that we are due to see that as kind of an important factor we want to pay attention to, specifically volume. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. But the main thing I want to kind of point out here is that we can see volume has shifted, of course. It was a pretty tumultuous last 24 to 48 hours. And the concept here is that there's way more liquidation above the price than below. And in fact, to touch on my post here, if you're not familiar with true retail longs versus open interest, how that works, these are deltas. Open interest deltas dropped significantly since yesterday, kind of just letting us know that the whales are just kind of fooling around a little bit, like kicking rocks, if you will, not really trading all that much. It's a weekend, we don't expect that, but generally speaking, that dropped off a cliff, just letting us know that the trend itself is slowly discontinued, right? Usually you want to see high open interest and a good trend. All that said, true retail longs are at 2.4%, maybe a little bit higher or lower now, but really close to that low zero mark. That tells us that short retail delta is essentially way too high. It's almost maxed out, telling us that retail traders are shorting the hell out of this weekend. What does that usually encompass, or what does that usually tell us? Well, it tells us that they got a target on their back, right? So with that, in combination with this funding rate decreasing, this is decreasing either A, spot volume's increasing, or people are too heavy on shorts. I think it's a bit of both because we can see basically delta spot. We'll talk about that first. The spot delta is essentially increasing, right? So we kind of look here, we can see significant increase in spot delta. Binance, Bybit, and a little bit of Coinbase is effectively buying a spot here today, right? So just keep that in mind. With spot volume goes up, it's usually a positive sign, or it's a sustainability thing you want to recognize, right? If the spot volume goes up and the price is going kind of sideways or flat, that's a good sign here, right? We can kind of see that even though the price is just barely making higher lows, we can see a much better scenario here for spot volume. Granted, this is a 15-minute time frame. It's only taken into consideration the last 2 hours, but it is certainly something you want to look for. And what we probably will see is a pivot, basically a double bottom on open interest, where the price should recover from here. So if it wasn't a weekend, this would make much more sense. Everything has to come with a kind of a caveat here lately, more specifically, or like a disclaimer rather, that we're in a position right now where you got to kind of respect the overall market trend. The trend is down still, so taking a long is inherently more risky. But the truth is, market makers are working that perfect trap here where shorts are starting to get heavy on a weekend leading into a holiday weekend, and that creates a really unique circumstance there. It's a very, very odd one. Anyways, when it comes to large positions, we got pretty significant buy interest at 73.5K. There's 100 million in leveraged long limit buy orders there. So it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to see that level, but it does suggest that we see a sweep of 74,000. That 73.5 would be that pivot point. Okay. Once again, large positions don't mean a whole heck of a lot. It just kind of tells us that that's an interested area, and a lot of times the price will slow down when it hits those ranges. All that being said, let's take a look here at the back end, just a little bit more thorough here when it comes to some high block capital data. Once again, we're up at 5%, so longs are piling in a little bit, but once more, open interest delta is super low, and that's generally not a great sign. Having said that, looking at the 3-day time frame, there's still a lot more liquidation left to the upside than the downside here, specifically 78 to 79. So if we get a push up here, I do still think that 78K would be the most logical, sensible place for the price to push, right? 24-hour tells us we might actually see 76 to 75.5 first, though. Okay, so it would make perfect sense for us to sweep that extra little level just below here before the next pivot. But once more, disclaimer, again, I know I'm a broken record here, but it's a weekend. Generally, there's low volume. These moves are fairly inconsistent, and it's difficult to want to kind of trade these conditions. As we can see, liquidation delta is at break even now, right? We had pretty high delta 2 days ago, a very low delta yesterday. Now we're right at break even. It's as if it never happened, right? So market makers made a ton of cash on the way down. They sold, and then they bought, and who knows what they're going to do next, right? We're just kind of waiting for them to figure it out. So, it's unfortunate, but that's kind of the way of the market right now, folks. You kind of got to just go with the trend here. And right now, the trend right now is, for lack of better terms, it's still down, right? We can see this lower high, lower low pattern, a little more definitive or obvious in the 4-hour time frame. But the key takeaway here on the 4-hour time frame is that we have shifted gears here to an extent. In other words, we're right there at that point of control at 76.7. We've talked about that being kind of that important range for us. So once more, closure above 77,000 is something we really want to look for. When I say closure, I'm referring generally to a daily time frame that shows that there's a full 24-hour period above that level. All that said here, just kind of quickly note, we're kind of in the middle of these moving averages, but as you can see, they're running synonymous with this descending trend. And while no descending or ascending trend is perfect, it never will be, it kind of gives us confluence here, right? We got a lot of things happening right in this range. So the more things that continue to stack in one area tells us that's either support or resistance, depending on obviously where we kind of figure out or consolidate, right? In a perfect world, we continue to consolidate at 76.5, 77,000, and then the price will inevitably go higher, right? Because we're breaking that lower time frame structure. Having said that, though, we do got to recognize we got our local highs here on the 4-hour of roughly the range of 78 to 78.5, right? So if the price were to break and continue a bit higher, we can tell, though, that we're going to have some difficulty crossing those ranges there, too. So just because we close above 77 doesn't mean we're just going to catapult to 80 plus. I think we're going to have a lot of trouble surpassing the 78 to 80K range, but suffice to say, consolidating around 77K or higher will absolutely give us that opportunity to be able to go a little bit higher there, right? Speaking of which here, just to kind of touch on this because folks were kind of curious, I like to kind of clarify. This is a weekend, so once again, these trading market sessions are less reliable just based on them really traditional markets in these countries is effectively not really not really something that happens on a weekend, right? Even though crypto is 24/7, their traditional market hours are a little bit different on weekend. So having said that, though, we do have a previous Asia low at about 76.3. This is including Sydney, of course, but we saw that sweep here of that level and the price consolidating here. It would make sense for the price to pivot and go higher. Okay. Keep in mind there is still, once we already verified some liquidation below between 76 and 76.5. It's an area you want to pay attention to. Certainly I wouldn't see any problem with market makers coming and hitting that level and then bouncing from there. But once more, spot volume slowly increasing. We're consolidating this range. While it is a lower low, we swept those ranges, and it would make sense, of course, to see the price potentially pivot here moving forward. It's just a slightly larger favorability. But when you look at everything, right, you look at the last 48 hours with just that big old reset button, everything kind of just whoop, whoop, as if it never happened. The trend here was likely to break out and go higher. So to me, the likelihood of a breakout to go higher here is now greater because we have a lot more liquidation just above the price. Okay, so market makers have done a very, very good job of trapping shorts this weekend into those positions that will likely get squeezed out in the next 48 hours. Once again, Tomorrow's a regular holiday, a US holiday, so I wouldn't expect amazing things. We could actually see later this evening some market volatility based on just Asian markets opening. So there's that. So keep that in mind. But for the most part, we might and should see a fairly flat day tomorrow. All that said, we got a nice little pivot off 30 on the RSI, 20 on the MFI. We're right there at that 50% mark on the RSI. So a lot of the reasons why the 4-hour should progress higher, or showing us that continuation higher makes more sense. So I'm leaning more towards upside here. Once more, if you exclude the last 48 hours and what happened, the likelihood of upside was higher at that point. It's still high now, especially with these lower time frame convergences we're seeing. All right. So those are my thoughts. What are yours? Why don't you comment below? I hope I was clear and concise in how I described that. Make sure you join us over on, again, Twitter, Telegram, and Discord. And obviously, if you want to become a better trader, CryptoCash.tech is the site. I think we've got a couple of spots left available. I usually have a limit in my community because I don't want to have too many people in there, if that makes sense. Either way, reach out if you have any questions. We'll look forward to seeing the next one. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.